and welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. On this week's podcast, we're going to have a condensed version of the six-pack of topics. We're going to get into the news from NFL OTAs this week, the synopsis released for Avengers 4 and what does it mean for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, along with the controversial comments by the Suns general manager about the first overall pick in the draft. We're going to have a conversation with MMA Insider Dizz at Talk MMA on Twitter about the UFC's new deal with ESPN starting in 2019. And then we will wrap up the podcast with my review of Deadpool 2, which I saw this week. So let's open up that six-pack and get started. Topic number one on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast, NFL OTAs, which are voluntary, not mandatory. Many of them open this week. And it was very interesting because the guys who were at team facilities this week versus the guys who were not. In some cases, it's predictable. It's predictable the Eagles would not have Michael Bennett there because he lives in Hawaii. He's never really been at OTAs in the past. Tom Brady's off doing Tom Brady stuff with the family. Not surprising. But it's some of the other guys that really stood out to me who were not in attendance versus who was. And specifically, Odell Beckham Jr. is at OTAs, while Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Donald are not. Anyone who knows me is aware of my hypercriticalness for Odell Beckham Jr. I've been frustrated with his on-field antics. I've been frustrated with some of the comments he said, his lack of maturity, just all kinds of issues I have had with him over the last couple of years. For him to be at OTAs this week is huge. It's not just huge for the Giants, but it's a huge step for him in his development as a man and as a professional. Beckham could have been just like Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Donald, holding out because they want a new contract, holding out because he's not getting his way, holding out because the world isn't fair and life isn't fair and I'm not getting what I want. But Odell, despite his diva tendencies, did not take the diva way out. Unlike Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Donald, Odell Beckham Jr. is at OTAs this week. Odell Beckham Jr. is putting in work. He is with his teammates. He's learning the new offense. I have to applaud Odell Beckham Jr. and say, look, if this is the kind of work he's willing to put in to be there for his teammates this week, to show the world that he wants to be involved with the Giants offseason program, that he believes in the new head coach, that he's there for his quarterback and there for his teammates. That is going to go a long way, not just for his short and long-term future with the Giants, but it's also going to go a long way with his own teammates because people are going to say, look, you didn't have to be here. No one told you you had to be here. No one expected you to be here, but he showed up anyway and he's putting in the work. That shows you the maturity and the development and the growth of Odell Beckham Jr. And if this is the kind of Odell we can expect moving forward, I think Odell is going to have potentially an even better season this year than we ever expected. Now, for Le'Veon Bell and Aaron Donald, I get that you're holding out for a contract. I get that you want to be paid a certain number. But you guys are handling it all wrong. Steelers wide receiver Antonio Brown said this week that it would do a lot of good if Le'Veon Bell was in the building at OTAs. Because when you're in the building, you're showing that you're there for your teammates. You're showing your commitment to the organization. If Le'Veon Bell's in the building, he can see the Steelers general manager and say, hey, look, man, I just want to let you know this is just business. I understand there might be some contract negotiation issues. I understand you and my agent are working things out, but I just want to let you know that I want to be part of this organization, and I'm going to tell my agent how much I like being here, how much I appreciate you guys, and I want to be here for my teammates. Him not being there doesn't do that. All him not being there does is put a cloud over the entire organization about the future of one of their best players if he's going to be there not just this upcoming year, but in years to come. And you don't need that kind of distraction for a team that is trying to get better, who lost at home to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the postseason last year. Aaron Donald, he's been crying for money for 2 years now. There has to be a reason why the Rams aren't giving him the long-term deal that he wants. I don't know if they don't believe in him. I don't know if is there something that we don't know about the negotiations behind the scenes that are making it very difficult. Whatever the reason is, there has to be a real concrete reason why this deal hasn't gotten done. And I think that for Donald and Bell to not be at OTAs this week, along with Rob Gronkowski of the Patriots, I'll throw him in there, another guy who's had some complaints and issues this past offseason. I say, look at Odell Beckham Jr. The guy has said he wants a new contract. He wants to be paid a certain number. He's been a diva. He's been irrational. He's been immature. And you know where he's at? He's at OTAs. I applaud Beckham Jr. for not being like the Le'Veon Bells and the Aaron Donalds of the world. To show the Giants organization and to show his teammates that he is 100% committed to the 2018 season and to the New York Giants organization, and that it's not just about the money for him. It's not just about him getting his. It's about the whole team. And I think that's going to have a profound impact on the Giants season in 2018. Topic number 2 in this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. So the synopsis for Avengers 4 has leaked online. And this is kind of in the midst of a lot of discussion going on about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because the next movie after Avengers 4 is Spider-Man 2. And then after Spider-Man 2, it's supposed to be Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So there are characters who were wiped out in Infinity War who are vital parts of those movies. So the synopsis that has come out is this, and I'm going to read exactly what it says before I explain it. Quote, a culmination of 22 interconnected films, the 4th installment of the Avengers saga will draw audiences to witness the turning point of this epic journey. Our beloved heroes will truly understand how fragile this reality is and the sacrifices that must be made to uphold it, unquote. This synopsis basically confirms 2 things immediately to me. 1, Avengers 4 is going to be not just a part 2 of this Infinity Saga that was started about a month ago with the release of Avengers Infinity War. They're calling it a turning point in this epic journey. This further adds fuel to the fire for the rumor that was released last week that the sequel for Avengers Infinity War, Avengers 4, which is going to come out May of 2019, is going to deal with time travel. And what is the perfect way for there to be a turning point? It is to change history as we know it. They also says how fragile this reality is. So obviously, whatever changes they make is going to affect reality as we know it, and that sacrifices must be made to uphold it. Well, if sacrifices must be made to uphold it, someone's going to die and they can't undo it. The dicey thing with time travel is there's always that part in the back of your mind. Well, I can always travel back in time and change this. If we can't just go back and time travel whenever we wanted, there has to be a reason or a way that Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and company change the past, come back to the future, and do it in a way that doesn't allow them to just keep going back in time whenever they want and keep undoing and redoing things. And I get back to the word sacrifices. Chris Evans' contract is supposed to be up with Avengers 4. Robert Downey Jr.'s contract is supposed to be up with Avengers 4. There's a few other actors whose contracts are up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the very near future. So whatever changes they make, whatever sacrifices they're referring to in Avengers 4 obviously has something to do with those characters going away. I'm not going to come straight out and say that Chris Evans character, Steve Rogers, dies, or Tony Stark, played by Robert Downey Jr., is going to die. But I will say that it's becoming very evident that after Avengers 4, they're going to hyper-focus on the other characters. on Spider-Man, on Black Panther, on Doctor Strange, on the post-Infinity War version of Guardians of the Galaxy. And I mentioned it about a month ago. The released information about Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes by the Russo brothers on their Instagram and on their Twitter accounts still infers that Bucky Barnes is going to take over the mantle of Captain America at some point. And if the only way that happens in the comics is when Steve Rogers dies. And if we're going to use comic book theories about a comic book movie, which is not too far-fetched, then one of the sacrifices may be Steve Rogers. More information is going to come out about Avengers 4 directly and indirectly over the next several months, and we will keep you updated on all of it right here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. Topic number 3 on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. So Suns general manager Ryan McDonough spoke to ESPN last week at the NBA Draft Combine, and he was asked about if they would consider trading the first overall pick. And one of the reasons why they asked him this question was because Ryan McDonough's former boss, Danny Ainge, last year traded the first overall pick to the 76ers. The 76ers got Markelle Fultz. The Celtics got Jason Tatum. And the Celtics have some draft picks coming their way in the next couple of years thanks to this deal. This is what Suns general manager Ryan McDonough had to say when asked if they would trade the first overall pick.
We're certainly open to that. We'll consider it. I think, obviously we'll have more information closer to the draft than we do today after we go through the workout process and the interview process and get the medical physicals. So we're open to that. I think if you look around the NBA as far as the veteran players, there are probably a few players we consider trading the pick for outright, just pick for player number 1. So it'll be a busy month for us. I've been in the league 15 or 16 years now. Never been with a franchise that's had the number 1 pick. So it's a big responsibility, but especially in this draft with the talent at the top, one we look forward to, and it's going to be an exciting month in Phoenix.
Boy, that was a loaded answer. First of all, if he's already considering the concept of trading the first overall pick, that tells you they're not sold on these prospects. That they're not convinced that DeAndre Ayton or Luka Doncic are the guy to pick at first overall. Again, extremely surprising to hear a GM be that open about this topic. The last GM I heard this open about this topic was John Robinson of the Titans, before the Titans traded their top picks to move down the draft. Remember, both the Titans and the Browns traded down from 1 and 2 a couple of years ago, and that's why the Rams got Jared Goff first overall, and the Eagles got Carson Wentz second overall in the 2016 NFL Draft. The NBA has been infamous for draft busts. There has been so many guys who have not worked out from the NBA draft that I'm surprised more teams don't try to trade out of the top 5, top 10 picks. And you heard the GM Ryan McDonough say it right there. Look, we're still early in this process, but nothing's guaranteed. There's veterans out there in the league right now who we would trade the first overall pick for if we were to go down that road. Hey, man, if I'm the Suns, I don't care that DeAndre Ayton went to Arizona. And I don't care if my coach used to coach Luka Doncic in international play. If I am not thoroughly convinced that either one of those guys is going to be an impactful franchise player for the next 6 to 12 years, then why not trade the pick? And if you can trade the pick, why not trade it somewhere that's going to benefit your entire organization? Look, you have Devin Booker. You have TJ Warren. It's not like you're a team devoid of all talent. If you could find a team that's a little bit lower in this draft, accumulate some assets to get out of that spot, why not? It's definitely not the most far-fetched thing I've ever heard. And I think one of the teams that is very fascinating in all of this, that could be an option for the Suns, the Los Angeles Clippers have back-to-back picks in the lottery, 12 and 13. And while DeAndre Jordan has a player option, DeAndre Jordan couldn't opt out of his contract. You can still trade for him at the draft and convince him, hey, why don't you opt in? We'll give you a contract extension. We want you here. And if that's something DeAndre Jordan is interested in, the Suns get a big man. They get 2 other first-round picks. They move down the draft, and they can let whoever falls to them fall to them and take the pick of the litter of who is left still within the top 15 picks in the draft. And getting back-to-back picks is no joke. I think that is definitely an option the Clippers and the Suns both have to keep an eye on in this draft. Another team that I think would be very fascinating in this conversation would be the Cleveland Cavaliers. What better way to convince LeBron James that you need to stay in Cleveland for one more year than to trade the 8th overall pick and a couple players to the Phoenix Suns for that first overall pick in the NBA draft? So you no longer just have the 8th pick. You have the pick of the litter. You could pick anybody in this draft if you're Cleveland. And what do you have to give up? If you decide we got to trade Kevin Love, if you're the Cavs and you can get the first overall pick, are you really going to cry me a river about trading Kevin Love? Of course you're not. And if you're LeBron and you're sitting there and you're telling me that I'm going to trade Kevin Love in the 8th overall pick to get the first overall pick, and you got to take on some contracts to offset it, that's probably an appealing conversation for LeBron at this point. And by the way, I mentioned contracts. There's a couple ways you can do this. I think probably the most ideal way to make this trade work, if you're going to do it straight up with just 2 teams, if you're the Cavs, you're probably going to have to take on Tyson Chandler and Jared Dudley's contracts. That's the only way you're going to get one-on-one straight up close for this deal. So you're talking about a deal that would send the 8th overall pick and Kevin Love to the Phoenix Suns for the first overall pick, Tyson Chandler and Jared Dudley. Probably the Cavs have to give up some other future first-round pick as well, and just kind of sweeten the pie. Because financially, it's hard to make a deal like this work. And Kevin Love is a guy who could fit what the Suns like to do. You pair him with Devin Booker, you pair him with Josh Jackson and TJ Warren. It spreads the floor even more. It allows you to have more spacing. It gives you more depth. And it doesn't strap your salary cap in a way. You're actually going to save a little money in the long run with this deal. Now, obviously, the deal is a little tricky because if you're the Cavs, you're taking on Tyson Chandler, but you already have a guy like Tristan Thompson. Well, that's where the third team probably has to get involved, like the New Orleans Pelicans come in, because there's no guaranteed that Boogie Cousins is staying there in free agency. His contract is up. He's going to hit free agency. There's no guarantees there. You need a big man who's going to allow Anthony Davis to not have to play center. Davis said multiple occasions doesn't want to play center. You send Tristan Thompson to the Pelicans. If you're the Cavs, what contracts are you going to take on? Well, let's say you go out and get a Mirotic, for example, a guy who is basically going to fulfill the role of Kevin Love with a much lower price tag on him in that offense. And you probably got to take on another contract just to make the money work. So you're probably looking at a guy, maybe like an Alexa Jinsa, a guy who's basically going to be a salary cap dump and who has a trade exception. Maybe that's the kind of deal that will work as well. And again, the Cavs get the first overall pick. The Suns get the 8th pick. The Suns get Kevin Love. The Pelicans get Tristan Thompson. And the Cavs get some more veterans and more flexibility for their roster. Again, Tyson Chandler, Mirotic, Jared Dudley, and the first overall pick. If that's not a sales pitch to keep LeBron James, I don't know what the heck is. So the Suns get rid of having to deal with the first overall pick. The Cavs get the luxury of that pick. The Cavs get some more players, and everybody wins in the long run. So if the Suns GM is serious about trading that first overall pick, I just did all the work for you, buddy. I got the formula right there. Call the Pelicans, call the Cavs, or call the Clippers. Get the deal done. You don't want to deal with picking between Doncic or Ayton? There you go. Everybody wins, right? All right, coming up next on the Mutant Blitz podcast, my one-on-one conversation with MMA Insider Dizz. We're going to get into the UFC's new deal with ESPN starting in 2019, what it means for mixed martial arts moving forward, and some quick thoughts as well on the upcoming fights in the 2018 calendar for the UFC right here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. And be sure to stay tuned, as after my conversation with Dizz, I will give you my review of the movie Deadpool 2. And welcome to my one-on-one conversation this week on the Mutant Blitz podcast. He was my guest on the very first inaugural edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. And we bring him back this week because the news went down. It was rumored for months about what may or may not happen with this, but it's official. The UFC is going to ESPN starting in 2019. Not just digital. Now it's all broadcast platforms. And of course, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Dizz. You can follow him at Talk MMA on Twitter. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, my friends. Nice to be back on the Mutant Blitz podcast. Man, it's been how long has it been since that first episode?
February.
Wow, February, and you're entrenched pretty deep, man.
Yeah, 14 episodes in. I'm entrenched.
Well, along with all the other work that you're entrenched in over the time, man.
All right, let's get into this, man. We gotta give credit where credit's due. You were one of the first people, it was back in January, who talked about the fact that ESPN might be one of the people bidding for the UFC, and now we look at this 5-year, $1.5 billion deal, and I think we all can agree that the UFC got what they wanted, which was the big money payoff for the rights to broadcast, and ESPN got what they wanted, which is another stranglehold on another sports platform.
Yeah, they really wanted to rip this thing out of Fox's hands, and Fox didn't want to overbid. I guess they want to, and just like a lot of other networks, it seems like they just wanted to hang back and see if they could put their money in on something else. So, but yeah, I guess kudos to ESPN for winning a bid war. Originally, it was supposed to be a split broadcasting deal between Fox and ESPN, but it looks like it appears to me that Fox bailed out.
I think Fox bailed out because of the fact that they put all this money now in the WWE SmackDown. So SmackDown is going to be going to Friday nights on Fox cable television. So that changes that whole dynamic for WWE. And it seems like Fox said, you know what, we're not going to overpay for UFC, but we're going to go all in on WWE and give it a Friday night platform, which, by the way, has a lot to do with the fact that what Fox is doing. People noticed recently they were canceling and renewing specific shows, but the shows they were renewing were not the Friday night shows. So I guess in some ways people should have seen this coming.
Yeah, they should have seen it. Is there any possibility that they keep Karen Bryan on Fox? I'm just wondering. Hey, Fox had a backup plan, and they should have, because WWE does solid numbers. Whether they do a consistent 1.8 million viewers on a night, or whether they do a consistent 2.2, somewhere in the ranges of 1.8 and 2.2 to 2.5. is usually a typical SmackDown type numbers. You don't get, and if you're getting that every week, you're surpassing anything that the UFC's doing. As far as, especially when they're putting together week prelims, main cards breaking down, either due to steroid PED problems.
And also, and also, don't forget, Friday night is a beautiful night for WWE because you're not going against NFL Thursday or Sunday. You're not dealing with any college football on Saturday. So you literally could have Friday night all to yourself, programming-wise.
Yeah, well, here's my only problem with that is that who's really home on a Friday night? And you got kids got birthday parties, softball game, or baseball games, softball games this time of year. Kids are typically very busy, and parents are busy during the summertime. Who's really going to be home to watch that? That's my only issue with this, is that Friday nights are typically not a TV night. Yes, Bellator may be on. Yes, a Tito Ortiz fight or a Kimbo Slice. Well, rest in peace, Kimbo. Back in that day, when Kimbo Slice, somebody may stay at home on a Friday night. A fight fan with no girlfriend may stay home on a Friday night and watch a Bellator event just to get those big names. But in all, who's really home on a Friday night is going to be watching, WWE? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Well, it's also the value
now,
of DVR. It's, you know, people could DVR things and watch it the next night or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, what can you watch on Fox that you can't watch on WWE Network?
Well, that kind of gets into my question about UFC Fight Pass. We'll get to that a little bit later. Let's jump back to the UFC here with ESPN. So Fox is out. Fox is totally done. There's no digital.
Yep.
There's no linear. Now, I had heard, a little birdie told me that NBC was involved in the bidding for the UFC as well, but the ESPN far and away outbid what NBC was doing.
Okay, yeah, and this is a shell game. I mean, this was just a shell game by NBC. They had no real intentions on actually bidding for the UFC. What ended up happening was that NBC threw a ton of money into the mix or said they were going to throw a ton of money into the mix just to say, hey, we're serious here, we're bidding here. And that was just to drive up the prices of the other broadcasting networks to drive up their prices for bidding. And in the long run, what that does is it allows NBC a little bit more spending power when, say, for instance, they want to purchase into something else.
Well, like, for example, the NBA and MLB contracts, they're going to be coming up in a couple of years. And we all know where did NBA and MLB used to be in the 90s? It was on NBC.
Exactly. Who didn't watch that? NBA on NBC. It was a thing because, I mean, they were one letter apart from being the same thing. I mean, that's where a lot of New York Knicks fans started to sweat a whole bunch when Reggie Miller was, threatening to put them out of playoffs.
Miller time.
So, I mean, those were the days, man.
Listen, there was nothing better than a halftime show with Peter Vesey cursing the heavens because of the Pacers.
Oh, who didn't love Peter Vesey, man? And I will tell you that I did contact somebody in conjunction with NBC, and I will tell you, and I have another little nugget for you on the NBC thing, because they are involved with Professional Fighters League. First things first, just to verify what you were saying, yes, the NBC is going to make a hard drive after NBA. Not as much of a hard drive after the MLB, but it's running a close second. But they do want the NBA. So that's coming from a source that I spoke to, from NBC.
Interesting.
Professional Fighters League, a little nugget to drop on. Nobody else knows this. Nobody else knows this. You're only going to hear this from me. They have a 1 year at a time deal with NBC. So at the end of this year, Professional Fighters League, their contract with NBC is going to be up. However, regardless of how Professional Fighters League does this year with their new season that's coming up, and I encourage everybody to watch this tournament. It's going to be a great tournament all series long this year. They are looking at right now. They're looking at somewhere between a 2 to 4, 3 to 5 year deal with NBC after this year is over with. So far, everything is looking great. They have Pro Fight League has their first show coming up June 7th in New York City. They have another show coming June 21st in Chicago and July 5th in Washington, D.C., which is where, I don't know if you know this or not, but this is where Professional Fighters League has relocated their headquarters, is now in D.C.
Right. And that's because of some of the ownership changes, correct?
That's correct, yes. And and here's something else, too, just to get some shout-outs to these guys. You guys need to be watching out for Andre Harrison at featherweight. He's the guy that dethroned Lance Palmer last year for that featherweight title. You guys need, obviously, Jake Shields is a guy to watch. Mike Kyle is a guy to watch. Andre Lobato, Rex Harris, and Alexandria Almeida. These are all guys that you guys need to be watching for this year. These are some big names. They're studs. And these guys love to stand up and bang, and almost second thing. Well, with the exception, obviously, of Jake Shields. He just likes to work you over and take you down and humble you.
We all know Jake's a grinder. Jake will just grind you to death and make you either beg for the end or you just survive to the end.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something, too. If somebody were to put me in the cage with Jake Shields and I knew he would grind on me for 15 minutes, I would just throw an arm up and say, dude, just take it. I can't take this for 15 minutes. I would just, dude, just here, I'll hold my neck right out there for you, bud. And it's like, go ahead, just light choke, I'll tap. Don't worry about it.
All right, so let's get back to the ESPN UFC deal. So we know NBC, they didn't get it, but it was a shell game, like you said. They got PFL. They're going to go for the NBA next. And then, of course, we know with the NBA and ESPN, the NBA is split between two platforms. It's TNT and it's ESPN. And when dimes come to dollars, the NBA would rather be on ESPN long-term than TNT because TNT doesn't have the extra coverage they can build around it. Whereas ESPN, they got the digital, they got the linear, they got the 2 million shows that all talk the NBA. Whereas TNT, it's just one show built around it.
All right, correct. And here's another thing, too. One show to build around. Well, this is one of the biggest things that we notice about how well a show does. What's your lead-in program?
Right.
Professional Fight League used to be called World Series of Fighting.
Right. I
firsthand spoke with their executives just right before their event in Kansas City. I went to their Kansas City event, World Series of Fighting in 35. It was unfortunate that Justin Gaethje's opponent at that time he supposedly got sick, picture air quotes. And they said they felt really good about what the ratings were going to be because they had a NASCAR lead-in. So, and NASCAR, obviously one of the most popular sports in the United States right now. So having that type of a lead-in, what lead-in are you going to get on TNT besides The Alienist, Animal Kingdom, The Claw, Good Behavior, The Last Ship? NBA on TNT is the only thing that anybody basically goes to TNT for.
Hey, come on, man. It might be a replay of Paul Blart Mall Cop.
I can't stand that guy.
Look, I don't hate TNT. But for the sake of anything holy and sacred, if I have to watch another NBA game and I got to see another commercial for Dennis Leary on Animal Kingdom and that cast of characters, I can't take it anymore, man. Like, there is no value to some of these TNT.
Did you just say that Dennis Leary is on Animal Kingdom?
Yes, I guess he was desperate for a role.
Wow. That's, wow, he must have been going broke.
It must have been going something. I mean, look, I don't know what some of these actors say. I guess they'll just take anything. I don't know.
All right. Well, I have a short breakdown of the ESPN deal. So we're looking at $300 million for 42 events.
Okay.
That's part of the deal, which is $7.1 million per event.
Now, I know some of those are exclusively digital, though, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. $150 million for 15 digital shows. They're going to do a second deal added to 5 ESPN Plus events. They're going to assign a $10 million value at 5 of those obviously is going to equal about a $50 million contract. So the second deal was for $150 million. And if you take out $150 million, so you subtract that $50 million, obviously it's going to be $100 million for linear rights. I mean, you're looking at more than 170 total hours of content.
So really quick, that means the UFC is only making about $20 million more per year for the linear rights, and they're making the most of the money on the digital rights.
That's what it seems. Yeah, if you want to break down by salary, yeah, I mean, it looks to me like they're making $10 million per show on digital.
Now, see, that's fascinating because the UFC already has Fight Pass. So what incentive do people have to ditch Fight Pass, which gives you everything UFC, and to sign up for ESPN Plus?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't feel very confident about the feature of UFC Fight Pass with this deal. I mean, should I cancel my subscription? I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now. It's like, I mean, is there going to be anything on Fight Pass now that I'm seriously you could pay $9.99 for, $9.99 a month for a video library. Great, fantastic. But what else are you going to do? Everything else is going to ESPN, so why even have Fight Pass? Which I honestly felt in the first place that Fight Pass should have been the wave of the pay-per-view feature for them.
Right.
It would, it's people who are already subscribed. You pay $9.99, offer the pay-per-view at a discount rate. Most people watch stuff on Fire Stick anyways, or some app form.
Right.
Make a deal with Sony so that PlayStation Network has the UFC app, which they do not. I don't know what's taking them so long. Maybe it's the exclusive deal maybe they have with Xbox. I'm not sure. The future of UFC Fight Pass is looking pretty bleak.
And especially since ESPN Plus is actually cheaper than UFC Fight Pass. You're only talking about $4.99 right now for ESPN Plus. And, time will only tell how valuable that platform is going to be. And I'm not trying to diss on ESPN, but there's something to be said for that the majority of the programming right now at this time of year is college softball, European soccer, and lacrosse. And then you have a couple of exclusive 13th hole cams of the Players Championship. I'm not getting a lot of incentive. The UFC is an incentive, but for the non-hardcore fight fan who maybe doesn't watch everything on their devices, maybe that $4.99 really isn't worth it yet.
Yeah, I don't know yet, but until they get ESPN on their device, like I said, it's like you just said, it's not going to be worth it at all. So, in retrospect, ESPN is going to obviously benefit the best, and like we said, UFC Fight Pass is going to be dying a very slow death. They're going to be on life support, not that they're not already.
So now, what kind of impact can this have for the UFC? We know that after the first TV deal with Fox, it obviously upped the ante for them. It built their pedigree. It kind of launched them more into the mainstream with the other big boys. And now that we can say that the UFC TV deal-wise is worth $1 billion, like the NFL, like the NBA, like Major League Baseball, even like the NHL and NASCAR, these are all billion-dollar TV deals. So now the UFC is in that tier. What can being on ESPN do for the UFC?
Well, it's going to make it more exciting than boxing on ESPN, that's for sure, because a lot of people have been floating more towards MMA than they have boxing. So, in retrospect, it is going to put UFC more in a mainstream setting than they were when they were on Fox. Now, Fox was a 7-long year, $100 million per year deal, which finally is going to be expired by the end of the year. And on Fox, it's been insane with Fox, because what's ended up happening is that they'll run a baseball game during the UFC prelims, and they will force everybody to either go to Fox Sports Go or Fox Sports 2, which a lot of cable companies don't have.
Correct.
So what ends up happening is that there's plenty of other options. Everybody has ESPN2. Everybody has ESPN, an ESPN app. Everybody has ESPN Plus.
And really quick, can I touch on the FS2 issue? Because I've had a lot of people ask me about that. And here's the issue with that. I know you probably know about this, but I think a lot of people don't. And that is the reason why FS2 isn't on a lot of platforms, and a lot of networks have taken a lot of the Fox channels off of their networks, is because basically Fox tried to position FS1 and FS2 as the new ESPN1, ESPN2. But the programming on those two networks pales in comparison to what ESPN offers. So they're upcharging their network before the network even launched, and the company said, well, you know what, off. And as a result, Fox is left out in the cold. UFC is being told you're going to be offered on these many networks, and it never happened. So in some ways, the UFC didn't fully get what they were promised.
No, they didn't. And in fact, Fox was in breach of contract, many times over this. I mean, we're talking about MLB games that were in their time slot, running over into their time slot well into the prelims. We're talking like their feature fights on their prelim cards were not even being featured because they were put on a crummy app, or they were put on Fox Sports, like we said, on Fox Sports 2. It's going to be a lot different because, like you said, if you want to put ESPN2 and Fox Sports 2 side by side, you're talking ESPN2 is the Andre the Giant versus, Shane Helmsworth. That's what we're looking in comparison here. I definitely just did a pro wrestling example enlightenment of WWE signing with Fox. So, but yeah, like you said, it pales in comparison. So, at least at this time, it kind of seems more official. You know, now that it's on ESPN. I mean, Fox Sports was created to try to challenge ESPN, and but ESPN's always been around.
Here's the thing. To me, I look at this deal as well, and that is Disney owns ESPN. I think that's something we overlook sometimes. The Disney umbrella covers ESPN, ABC, all these things. Disney has their hands in all these movie properties. So what's going to happen? You're going to start seeing random fighters in random movies, doing voiceovers, doing cameos.
Right, which is a great thing. And I want to ask too, didn't they just have a change of the guard over at ESPN?
Yes, they did.
Because they were very a lot of their commentators had free reign to be be overly political.
Yes,
and
now the new guy
Jamil Hill is no longer on ESPN because the man that's in charge right now, he wants to keep it mostly about sports and keep it out of politics.
Well, what they did was they got rid of the SC6 program, which Jamel Hill and Michael Smith was doing. And the reason for doing that was because they wanted to make SportsCenter more sports-centric. They wanted to be less opinionated-driven. And that's why Jamel now has been kind of stuck on the opinion website, The Undefeated. She's no longer doing main television work anymore. And the guy who's running ESPN now is not John Skipper anymore. Remember, John Skipper left because he said he had a cocaine addiction. That was convenient because 8 months later he has a new job. But anyway, so now the guy
he's still on as a consultant though?
No. He's working for another company
John
now.
Skipper, executive chairman of Perform Group.
Yeah, he's with another company now. So the guy who's running ESPN now is trying to make the company more hyper-focused on sports. And that's why they're making the push for ESPN Plus, because they want Plus to be the future of sports programming, because they want it to be that they want something digital that anybody can afford and anybody can take anywhere with them and watch a game anywhere they go. And the thing with Disney is trying to make this entire monster. That's why they're trying to buy out 21st Century Fox Studios, so they get the rights to all the Marvel characters back, so they can make their movies even bigger, make even more billions of dollars off of comic book characters that half the world didn't even know existed. And now you have a bunch of these fighters who are looking at this and they can say to their agent, hey, guess what? Why don't you tell somebody who knows somebody that since I'm on ESPN doing a fight, why don't we do a promotion for so-and-so's movie?
I mean, it all makes sense. I mean, that's what Paramount TV has been doing with Bellator fighters for quite a while now.
Yeah, and that's Paramount. I mean, that's not even on the same level.
I'm saying it's the same thing.
Right. It's just bigger.
Right.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Not specifically talking about the ESPN UFC deal. Let's talk about what is coming up for the rest of this year, because we still have to get through 2018, right? You know, sadly enough, we got another several months ahead of us. So what can we expect from the UFC for the rest of this year in terms of fights and in terms of promotion?
Oh, you can expect Russian collusion. They're going to Moscow here soon. Fabricio Verdun was just recently pulled off for alleged violation of the USADA violation. So Mark Hunt has taken his place. He'll be fighting Oleszek.
The irony of that.
The main events that you're going to be looking forward to are Thompson versus Till. That's going to be a ridiculous fight. Both of those guys are big for being 170 pounds. The fight that I'm looking most forward to is Whitaker and Romero, too, in Chicago. And I believe that's also the fight where Holly Holm is going to be welcoming Megan Anderson to the UFC as well.
That's going to be an awesome fight. Oh, I can't wait for that.
She is, I got to tell you, she is the only prospect that I'm looking forward to seeing coming up at 145 pounds for the female division. You take away Megan Anderson, the only person left is Cyborg fighting a bunch of 135-pound bantamweight, chicks who think that they're going to get that payday and, get that strap, and it's just not going to happen. So
look, here's the thing. You and I both know this, but Megan, she's got legit size. She's not muscled up. She's a legitimately tall, long, strong, athletic fightor.
Yeah, but she's also at a chemical disadvantage when she comes to Cyborg, and I don't care who on me for saying it. She's already had the benefits of her early issues of her career, and her body still has those benefits today. And that's why nobody wants to fight her. The only person who's really wanting to fight her right now is Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is UFC's bantamweight champion, and she, according to some people that I have spoken to close to her, it wants to take time to put on the right weight and be able to utilize the speed a little better, because she is more of a technical striker than Chris Cyborg is, and she's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well. And I will assure you that everybody down there at ATT will have some form of game plan to try to wear out Cyborg before 4 and 5 rounds.
What about the Cormier-Miocic fight? Any forward-thinking thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay, so you have Daniel Cormier, UFC's light heavyweight champion, fighting Stipe Miocic, the long reigning and most active heavyweight champion the UFC's had in quite some time.
Took long enough.
Busting chops, laying people out. He is a good wrestler. He's become a very well-rounded striker. He does have a boxing background, but he never really had to show it because of he was just putting his game plan all together. And Daniel Cormier has been fighting at 205 pounds now for the last couple of years, and he's been through some hell with John Jones mentally, and got clipped by Rumble in his fight before he ended up choking Rumble out. But my thing is that Cormier now is going to have to pack on a bunch of weight again, even though he's an Olympic caliber wrestler. And Stipe Miocic, he's going to have to do nothing. He's just going to have to go in doing what he does. It's Cormier he's going to have to make all the adjustments. The only thing he's going to have to, I think the only thing he's going to have to do at this point, he's going to have to watch out for that single high crotch takedown that Cormier likes to do. He likes to lift the guy up, he likes to turn him upside down, dump him on their head, and he likes to control him for the for the first, second round to try to wear this opponent out, and hopefully they lose stamina. And that's about as best of a chance as he's got going for him right now to beat Stipe Miocic.
When are we going to see Conor McGregor in a UFC octagon again?
And Conor McGregor is going to come around when Conor McGregor wants to come around. I still think that they're missing. He's going to have to write a few checks first to settle some of these lawsuits from the New York incident. I don't see him fighting in New York anytime soon, not even with an apology to the Athletic Commission, which in return, I honestly think it's the New York Athletic Commission that should be apologizing to everybody in MMA for as they run the show. But Conor McGregor, I'm telling you, he's missing a big chance right now to fight in Russia. He should be fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov in Russia. That is a big fight. That is big money. That's something that is attractive to Conor McGregor, and he has no belt, so he's got nothing to lose now.
Where does Kevin Lee and Tony Ferguson figure into all of this lightweight fiasco?
Kevin Lee is a future champion. I'm going to say that right now. Kevin Lee, the Motown phenom, is its future champion. That guy is ridiculous on the ground. He's got good striking. His striking's only going to get better. In a couple of years, I'd like to see how that fight goes again with Tony Ferguson.
You know, I was at the UFC Atlantic City fights, and I even said to him after the fight, I said, you know, we're all talking about all these different things, Kevin. I said, but Kevin, you just had a dominant performance. That was one of the most dominant wrestling performances I've seen, like a legit wrestling. Like, guys can wrestle, right? But like this was a legitimate, I'm going to take you down 2 leg, I'm going to take you down 1 leg, I'm going to drag you down, I'm going to angle you down. Like, he did everything to Barbosa and just beat him to a pulp. And to me, a guy like that, there's not tons of grinder type wrestlers left in MMA, because some of these fighters, let's be realistic, they're not being trained in legit wrestling anymore. Some of these fighters are all, the karate guys and the jiu-jitsu guys, whereas there's not as many elite athlete wrestlers anymore.
The elite athlete wrestlers are the ones that mostly have them. I tell you what's really going to make more well-rounded athletes is having more money or spending more money on their training rather than going to the strip club at night after they get that big paycheck. And I've always been a big proponent of that. These guys, these young guys, you can tell who the guys are that spend their money on the training, because you don't hear about them being out so much. You don't see the club pictures on their Instagram. You don't see, the post-fight pictures with all the drinks laying around at the club. Max Holloway won a fight a long time ago before he was champion, and his next Instagram picture was him in a coat laying on the back of the bed with a box of Krispy Kreme donuts sitting on his chest and one in his mouth. Just hanging out there. I mean, if Krispy Kreme donuts was the extent of your expenditure post-fight, I think you've done something real good. Now look, he's champion, and nobody wants to really fight him. This is where guys have to spend money properly on getting the right training partners. Or if you don't have the right training partners, put yourself in a position where you can relocate, where you have good training partners. Some gyms offer dorms. Get a damn dorm. Put your dues in. Pay that 10%. Make it happen. But you can't sit there and go spending money at the club and not have any money at all for training and paying a sparring partner paying a really good sparring partner $1,000 for the week, just so that, and then expect results. It just doesn't work that way. It's like a car. You get out of it what you put into it.
My man Dizz, at Talk MMA on Twitter, is where you can catch him, all of his unfiltered analysis. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast again. I know you got a busy life, so I appreciate you carving out some time for me tonight.
All right, brother. Hey, catch you on the dark side.
We're going to wrap up this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast with my recap review of Deadpool 2. Spoiler warning, just putting it out there, not trying to anger anybody or upset anybody, just letting you know ahead of time, this is a spoiler review. Every review is a spoiler review. That's how I'm handling it moving forward. So, Deadpool 2 really embodies an element of movies that is really missing from today's world, and that's Deadpool and Deadpool 2 are the Marvel Comics version of the type of movies that guys like Mel Brooks and Leslie Nielsen did years ago. And I specifically use those two gentlemen because of the fact that when those guys were doing the movies that they did, you know, when Mel Brooks was involved in movies such as Robin Hood Men in Tights and Spaceballs and History of the World Part 1, those were all movies that in many ways were making fun of something else. And Leslie Nielsen, the same thing. You know, he was in Airplane, when he was in Dracula Dead and Loving It, when he was in The Naked Gun. All of these kind of movies that Mel Brooks and Leslie Nielsen were involved in were the type of movies that they were fun, they were interesting, but they were also making fun of other movies and other ideas and other concepts. And in many ways, Deadpool does the exact same thing. Deadpool spends the majority of these movies, the jokes are making fun of how we view superheroes, how we view other movies, how we view action movies, how we view special effects. I knew going to Deadpool 2, I was going to laugh. And I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of comic book specific humor that was in this movie. There wasn't as many specific comic book references in the first movie. I think that was partially because of the fact they were trying to make Deadpool 1 stand on its own 2 feet, separate from any other type of superhero movie. And now you've established its independence and its difference. Now you can get into more of the comic book stuff. And one of the things that this movie is surrounded about was the introduction of X-Force. So Rob Liefeld, who was involved starting Image Comics in the 1990s, he was one of the creators of the original X-Force comics, one of the original creators of Deadpool. And he created X-Force as kind of a offshoot, something different than the X-Men themselves. So they have X-Force in this movie. Basically, Deadpool goes out, creates his own team after the love of his life is murdered. And he goes and tries to join the X-Men, and then he fails as being an X-Men recruit. And then after he's an X-Men recruit and fails at that, he ends up in a prison. He tries to help the kid and trying to get the kid back away from Cable, who was introduced into this movie. He establishes X-Force. And it's absolutely hilarious that the X-Force first team that he establishes, almost all of them die. And it's very similar to the comics, where all but 2 members are killed in the X-Force comics. So you have all these different characters like Shatterstar and Zeitgeist and Bedlam and Vanisher, all mutant characters who were involved in X-Force. They just wiped them all out at one point in the movie, and it's really funny. I think people, unless they read comics, might not have fully understood some of the references. There was definitely a lot of backwards shots in this movie. For example, the whole concept of there being an X-Force team in the middle and an X-Force team at the end of the movie is very similar to the comics as well, because X-Force goes through all these different incarnations and all these different versions of themselves. And the introduction of Cable, which I think Josh Brolin did a great job at, is interwoven with X-Force, because the original X-Force team is created by Cable. Cable leaves the team later, and in recent years, he has become part of the team again. So in the movie, they have Deadpool create the team, and it's almost inferred the reason why the team failed was because of Deadpool. And here's Cable, who, when he created X-Force in the comics, when he was running a team and leading a team, they were very effective and very good at what they did, which is helping people and saving the day. And throughout the movie, there was just all kinds of puns, and they reference Cable. Deadpool references Cable as, are you from the DC universe? Because you seem very dark. There's a reference to Cable's daughter as Hope Summers. In the comics is the first mutant in a very long time. So, that's a direct reference to the comics. They also make fun of Josh Brolin because he also plays Thanos. Deadpool tells Brolin's character Cable at one point to zip it Thanos. He refers to Domino because she's wearing a black leather outfit as Black Widow because she's played by the actress Zazie Beetz. And of course, that in and of itself is making fun of the comics, because in the comics, the character Domino is white as chalk. And in the movie, she is not anywhere close to that look. And I think they purposely did stuff like that. They purposely made Yukio not who she is in the comics at all. Yukio is a love interest of Wolverine at one point in the comics, and in the movie, she has nothing to do with Wolverine. And she might as well be part of like a cast of like a Dragon Ball Z movie, I guess. I don't really know fully what they were going for. It seemed like a combination of a lot of different things. The inclusion of Juggernaut was probably the surprise of the movie. I was not expecting that at all. I did not expect Juggernaut to be in this movie. I had no idea that he was going to be there. I thought that was one of the best reveals of the movie, when they showed that the big bad guy that they've been hiding in the basement of the super mutant prison was the Juggernaut. And it was really funny, especially because of the fact that you find out later at the end of the movie that the Juggernaut is CGI. He was all CGI and was voiced by Ryan Reynolds. So then Ryan Reynolds references later in the movie near the end, when Colossus and Juggernaut fight, he says, all right, now time for a very expensive CGI fight, basically making fun of all these movies that have all these CGI characters in them and in them fighting. The whole movie is basically partially a parody, and that's why I say, to me, it had a very Mel Brooks, Leslie Nielsen feel to it for those who are old enough to have seen those movies. If you haven't seen movies like Airplane and Naked Gun and History of the World Part 1 and Dracula Dead and Loving It, if you like that kind of humor, or if you've seen Deadpool 1 and you're thinking about seeing Deadpool 2, or you've already seen Deadpool 2 and you want to see something that's similar to those, that's the non-comic book version of what you saw in Deadpool. Now, the specific issue with Deadpool, this movie, is that they took out all the stops to 21st Century Fox Studios because they know that they may never get to produce a Deadpool movie ever again. They don't know what the future is for their characters and that property because of the fact that if Marvel does complete the buy of the X-Men properties, the future of the Deadpool movies is totally up in the air. It's totally uncertain and totally unknown how Marvel would use Deadpool. Would there ever be a solo Deadpool movie again? Would you just incorporate Deadpool into the rest of the universe? There's been a lot of rumors about an X-Force movie that would be the sequel to Deadpool 2. Does Disney pick up where the pre-production is for X-Force? We know that Disney has already said that they're not going to stop any movies that are in production. Like, it's not like there's going to be a movie that's being filmed and Disney walks on the set and says, all right, guys, no more filming this. Get out of here. No, they are going to let whatever's already in production finish. That includes the next X-Men movie coming out. And I'm assuming, depending on how far along an X-Force movie would be, I think that would determine if that actually gets off the ground or not. Right now, we know that New Mutants and X-Men Dark Phoenix are set to be released sometime in 2019. So if you go based on what Marvel/Disney producers have said, those movies are going to get finished. Those movies are going to be released. There's nothing holding those movies back. The issue with X-Force is that no filming has started for it yet specifically. There's no specific information that's been released, except for that if there was an X-Force movie, you would have Cable, Deadpool, and Domino, all played by the same people who played those characters in the movie Deadpool 2. So the future of that movie in and of itself is totally up in the air. And I think that because of the sale of 21st Century to Marvel, I think that's why a lot of people are really unsure what the future holds for a lot of these characters. And I think that's why, in many ways, Deadpool 2 didn't just pull out all the stops they could for this film in terms of effects, in terms of characters, in terms of just making the movie such a massive event. They also were making fun of everybody. They made fun of everybody they could. They made fun of Batman. They made fun of Justice League movies. They made fun of the Marvel movies. They made fun of other X-Men movies. They made fun of Wolverine's death. They literally made fun of anything they thought they could get away with. And on one hand, that's what made the movie great and fun. On the other hand, you could tell that they understood that this may be their last shot at doing this, so they weren't going to leave too many jokes in the bag. One of the very interesting things also about this movie is they reference Dr. Essex, also known as Mr. Sinister. So they had the Essex orphanage where basically mutants go and they're tortured and experimented on. At the end of X-Men Apocalypse, someone from the Essex ethics. Wow, this is really easy for me to say. Essex. Nathaniel Essex. E-S-S-E-X. Woo! Nathaniel Essex, who is Mr. Sinister. End of X-Men Apocalypse, to collect some of the samples from the experimentations that were going on with, for example, the character of Wolverine. He was there collecting the samples. So it's been inferred now for two different movies that in some way Nathaniel Essex is in this X-Men universe. We just haven't seen him as a villain yet. Now, I don't know if that means he's going to be the villain of X-Force. I don't know if that means he's the villain in X-Men Dark Phoenix. There was a rumor going around that Daniel Craig was going to play Mr. Sinister, which I would assume that would be in a serious movie more so than in a Deadpool type movie, because I'm going to venture out and say that if Deadpool is in a movie, it's not going to be all serious all the time. And if you're using a character like Mr. Sinister, it would kind of be a waste to waste him on a Deadpool type movie, which is where I don't know what X-Force is. There's all kinds of rumors about, is X-Force a spin-off of Deadpool, or is X-Force a totally different movie than the Deadpool movies? Again, these are questions that we have not answered, and they may not get answered for the next several months, because we don't know the timetable of the official Disney takeover of 21st Century Fox Studios. At the end of the day, look, if you enjoyed Deadpool 1, you'll enjoy Deadpool 2. If you like those old Mel Brooks, Leslie Nielsen movies, and you want to see it in just in a massive way with comic book characters, this is the movie for you. Some of the jokes you may not understand if you don't know a certain amount of comics. So when Deadpool, yells at Cable and says, "You're a grumpy old," he calls him a grumpy old man with a Winter Soldier arm, or when he says, he calls Domino Black Widow. All these things are comic book reference things. So these are some of the jokes that become even more hilarious when you know the context of the joke. Overall, I did enjoy Deadpool 2. I enjoyed the fact that they kept it true to the comic book concepts that these characters come from. And I think in many ways, Deadpool 2 may be better than Deadpool 1. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. Appreciate you catching the episode this week. I know we filled it up with a lot of content this week, but we had a lot of things to cover. I didn't want to neglect too much going on this week with the NFL and the UFC. I appreciate my man Dizz. Follow him at @TalkMMA for all of your MMA news and notes throughout the year. And tune in each and every week for my takes on the world of sports and comic book TV shows and movies on the Mutant Blitz podcast with me, your host, Josh Hennig.